All right, we got our sparkling water. We are ready to go. This is a second video of the How to Audit Accounts Receivable series. If you happen to miss the first one, make sure to watch that right here. In this video, I'm gonna go over how to prepare and audit an AR confirmation and also how to perform detail testing over accounts receivable. I initially thought I was gonna be able to cover how to audit accounts receivable in 2 separate videos, but I'm gonna break this down into 3. And today, like I said earlier, we're gonna test how to prepare and audit AR confirmations, how to perform detail testing over accounts receivable, and in the third video, we're gonna cover how to audit allowance for doubtful accounts and how to test subsequent credit memos. But for now, let's get into the video. Okay, so from the last video, from when we picked off last time, we made selections for AR testing. And these are the 4 selections that we made that we ended up sending to our client. Again, depending on what firm you're at, now how people send selections, like when I started in public accounting 9 years ago, we literally sent selections over email or we put in some Dropbox, but now there's so many cool tools that different firms have. But if you need help how to send emails, I'm gonna drop a link to a video right here so you can go ahead and check that out. But for now, just like I said earlier, we have these 4 selections that we made that we sent to our client, and these are the 4 selections that we made directly from the accounts receivable listing. And again, we're gonna test for existence of accounts receivable through our AR confirmation and substantive testing that we're going to be performing here. So now that we have our AR selection set, we sent these to the client. We told them that, hey, we need a copy of the invoice, a copy of the shipping documentation, and a copy of the payment, which I'll kind of go into as we go through the testing. So at first, when we have here, this is when we have our substantive detail testing over AR. So if we go ahead and kind of read the procedures that we set out, and I'll kind of walk you through each one so you can know exactly what to do for each step. So the purpose of our substantive testing is to test the existence of accounts receivable as of 12/31/2022. So first thing we did, we obtained the AR aging schedule directly from the client on tab 1. So look, as we reference here on tab 1, we obtained the AR aging that we already went over in part 1 of this series. So we obtained the AR aging, perfect. Second thing we do, to determine the amount of AR sample selections, BC utilized a sample design and evaluation worksheet to determine the sampling parameters for making haphazard selections. Again, depending on what firm you're at, every firm has different sampling methodology on how you determine the sample selections. I could probably make like a sample of a sample design worksheet that kind of has the main criteria that I'm pretty sure every firm would have when making sample selections. But for example's sake, in our AR testing here, we essentially put in the different sampling parameters that we have, materiality, the account balance, different things that will give you the amount of samples you need to make from an audit perspective, and depending on what firm you're at, the audit methodology, and you have to make a sufficient amount of samples, a minimum amount, in order to get comfortable over the account balance. So then on the third step here, to confirm our AR selections as of 12/31/2022, BC mailed/emailed confirmation requests prepared by the client directly to the third-party customer and received confirmations back directly from the customer. Please see tab 3.1 for confirmations received. So as we mentioned earlier, on this tab, we have all our AR selections that we made. We made 4 separate selections directly from the AR aging, and we determined in our sampling methodology that our sampling unit is going to be at the invoice level. I know sometimes I've seen people test AR at the total customer level. There's different ways and different methodologies on how you can get comfortable with the total AR. For our example's sake and what we're doing here, we're going to test it at the individual invoice level. Again, depending on if your firm or your manager or your partner wants you to test the total balance of each customer, obviously the steps are going to be very similar to what we're doing here, but slightly different, obviously, because our sampling unit is at the invoice level. Remember that. Our sampling unit is at the invoice level in our example. So from these 4 selections that we made here, we are required from an audit perspective to send confirmations for every single selection that we made here. So through these 4 selections, we prepared an AR confirmation. So this is when we're going to get into actually how to prepare an AR confirmation and also how to add the sufficient documentation in your audit work papers to make sure that you don't get any review notes, and hopefully you prepare it sufficiently enough to support the conclusion that you reach. So for example, on every single confirmation, and typically you'd be surprised, sometimes even now in 2023, Confirmations, some of them are still done manually depending on who you're confirming with, who the customer is. Sometimes they are done through websites like confirmation.com and other sites that are available to auditors now. But for our example, and again, you can take this example into really any software or any manual process that you use. So for every confirmation, obviously we're gonna need to put the date that we're sending the confirmation. So we're performing an audit as of 12/31/2022. So we're gonna put the date of March 19th, 2023. That is actually today. And then who's the company name? Well, we need to prepare a confirmation for every, again, back to our selections, we need to prepare a confirmation for every single selection that we made here. So we made 4 separate invoice selections, and we're gonna need to prepare and send confirmations for every single selection that we make. Even though, as you'll see later on, we might not get a response from maybe half, maybe none. You know, it depends how well we get responses. But from preparing the sale confirmation, the company name is, like you see earlier here, customer is Chris Brown LLC. That is right, you heard it, Chris Brown LLC. That guy's buying t-shirts from us, 100%. It's because we're doing, you know, a lot of good social media branding and all this good stuff. So he found out about CPA swag and he's trying to be part of the Cool Kids Club. So company name, Chris Brown LLC. Address, 123 No Guidance Street. Yes, you heard that right. 123 No Guidance Street. Love that song, by the way. Okay, 123 No Guidance Street, Los Angeles, California. That's where the company is headquartered. That's where we're going to be mailing the confirmation and also emailing the confirmation. Usually, depending on, you know, who your client is, they'll say, hey, you need to mail it to them. So believe it or not, yes, mail, like through the US mail. Or maybe you might need to email them. In practice, I see a lot more people emailing to the different customers that we're going to be confirming with. And usually the client will provide you with a contact that they have at the customer that handles a lot of their receivables. And then usually you'll kind of send it to that contact. So they'll give you kind of a list of emails that who you could send the confirmation directly to. So in the confirmation, and typically your firm will kind of have standard language on confirmations. I literally took this template off the internet and I kind of like finagled it a little bit to what we typically see in practice. So usually you don't really need to prepare any of this. It's usually given to you by your firm or whoever, you have a confirmation template that your firm will give you. So when you're confirming this, typically it'll say, and you got to make sure you're sending the right type of confirmation. You don't want to be sending an AP confirmation when you're trying to confirm AR or a cash confirmation. So for AR, you'll typically read, our auditors, BC CPA LLP, are currently engaged in an audit of a financial statements as of December 31st, 2022. In connection with the audit, we ask that you confirm the following invoice was outstanding as of December 31st, 2022. So we're telling Chris Brown LLC, whoever the heck we send it to, hey, in connection with the audit, your client is you are sending this to the customer, right? And your client, which is the customer's, hold on, who the customer is buying product from or inventory from, your customer is saying, hey, by the way, in connection, we're getting audited as of December 31st, 2022. And in connection with that audit, our auditors, BC, CPA, or whoever your firm is asking that you confirm that this invoice was outstanding as of 12/31/2022. And this invoice that you document here, if you see, I referenced tab 3, that's our testing, but that's literally this invoice here, Chris Brown LLC, invoice number 1129. So if we go back here, invoice number 1129, invoice date. What's the invoice date? 12/28, and what's the amount? $260,272. So we're trying to tell the customer that bought inventory from our client that has a receivable balance outstanding as of 12/31/2022. We're asking that customer to confirm this balance is outstanding as of year end. And again, continue with the confirmation. If the above invoice was outstanding according to your records, please sign the space provided below. Please identify on the letter in the space provided below if you disagree with the information. Please note that this is not a request for payment. Usually, a lot of times, I've seen in practice too over the years that a lot of the times the customers that you're confirming with, they actually think this is their client or your client saying, hey, you need to pay me. This is not a form or a request for payment. You are the auditor. You're just confirming that there is a valid receivable outstanding as of year end. You always need to get this signed by your client before you send any correspondence to their customers. So we're auditing CPA Swag, and their controller is John Riz. I totally made that up. But yeah, John Riz, because yeah, apparently that's a word I literally heard like the other day. I guess Riz is like a cool thing now. Okay, anyway, so John Riz, CPA, is the corporate controller. So he signed it and he's saying, hey, my auditors, I'm giving them permission to send you a confirmation. And hey, by the way, customer, can you please help me out here with the audit and confirm that this balance is outstanding as of year end? And then we say the amount above is in agreement with our records with the following exceptions. So we give the customer that we're confirming with an area to say, hey, you know what? Actually, this invoice, that's not outstanding. Or they can say, this invoice wasn't outstanding as of year end. They didn't sell me anything. I don't even know who this freaking John Riz CPA is. I never bought anything from CPA Swag. That can happen. Obviously, there's other steps that'll need to be taken if that happens. But in our example's sake, John Riz went ahead and said no exceptions were noted. And if we go back to this confirmation, we look at it. And then once we're kind of going through it also, we look at who signed the confirmation. And while you're going through it, obviously this won't be here, but the space will be provided for them to sign it. But the biggest thing when you're preparing a confirmation is you want to make sure, obviously, you have the right company name, the right address. When you're sending confirmations, you want to make sure that they are as exact as possible, if not perfect, because you want to try to get a confirmation, because getting a confirmation from a third party is always the best audit evidence you can get. And so our auditors, again, always make sure that the documentation is correct. You're obviously confirming the right invoice. You want to make sure the invoice number is correct, the invoice date, the amount. Again, always, I always triple, quadruple check your confirmations, because you don't want there to be any discrepancies in the confirmation. Because I've seen sometimes, and it happens before, that you literally send a confirmation and it doesn't even agree to the amounts that you're testing. It's like, okay, guys, come on. We got to make sure that we agree. Anything that we're saying, hey, this is what we're testing, that needs to be exactly on the confirmation, word for word, number by number. You always have to make sure that whatever you're confirming agrees back to your testing, without a doubt. Like, for example, we're confirming invoice number 1129. If we had, hey, can you confirm invoice number 1129 point, I don't know, we put 11291. And then the customer gets this and says, hey, wait a minute. It's kind of similar, but I don't have 11291. I have 1129. Then you're going to get a confirmation back that says, hey, I don't have invoice outstanding 11291. I have 1129. You're going to have to go back and forth on the emails. It's going to be a pain in the butt. So when you're preparing a confirmation, make sure whatever you are sending agrees exactly to what you are testing. Your confirmation that you're sending always needs to agree back to the test work that you're trying to confirm. Once we send this confirmation, and obviously, again, your client will give you a contact info for who to send it to. So we sent an email to Peter Smith, who's the corporate controller of Chris Brown LLC. So when you get it back, and this is just a note, on every, I don't care what work paper it is, every single one of your work papers, you need to add a note at the top of it that says what you did, what this is for, and what procedures we did to get comfortable that we're going to put this in the audit file. So again, this is going to be easier for whoever reviews your work. They're going to be able to look at this confirmation and say, okay, well, what happened? If you leave it blank, it's going to be a little bit difficult just to follow. So I added a note on here from an audit perspective, and I said, BC note, BC obtained the confirmation below directly from Peter Smith, controller, and then I put in parentheses also his email address to let them know that I got it via email directly from this guy, who's the corporate controller of the company. BC agreed the amounts confirmed below here to the testing performed on tab 3. On tab 3, we performed AR testing. What do we say here? 260, okay. Always make sure, cross-reference, tab 3.1. As no exceptions were noted, because Peter Smith, you see here, Peter Smith, controller, he signed it from the company Chris Brown LLC, and he dated it 3/22/2023. So he confirmed it on March 22, 2023. No exceptions were noted. So no exceptions were noted. As no exceptions were noted, BC will pass on further consideration. And that's it. That's as simple as it gets. Obviously, if you have discrepancies or you have any exceptions, maybe the customer saying that they don't really confirm with the amount that's outstanding, or the amount that you're confirming is a little different, there's other audit procedures you need to do. But hopefully the confirmation that you send and the information that's in there, your customer agrees with it, and this is as simple as it gets. Again, I think main things when you're preparing a confirmation is that you make sure you're sending it to the right person, the right address, the right contact info, and everything in your confirmation must agree back to your testing. Or when you get back your confirmation, even if, let's say, for example, you send the incorrect confirmation, but whoever's on the other side agrees to it, then you're just gonna have a mess on your hands from an audit documentation perspective. So just make sure that whatever you're sending on the AR confirmation agrees back to your testing. And if you have no exceptions, like we do in this example, obviously you just need to make sure that you document at the top of the confirmation who we obtained it from, how we're comfortable that that email is correct, right? We got it from Peter Smith, Chris Brown LLC. This appears to be a email from the company, directly from the company, and then we document what we did. We agree the amounts below to the testing performed on tab 3. So that's it. And unfortunately, in our example, we did not get back any other confirmations, but we would do the same thing, except we literally wouldn't have so let me delete this very quickly. We wouldn't have this, and we wouldn't have this. And then obviously this invoice number and the company name and who we're sending to would change. And we would just literally send one for each one of these customers. And if we were to get all of them back, then we would go ahead and put the same procedures. We'd add a note at the top, and we'd also add a reference to the test work that we're doing. So let's say this was at a different work paper in the audit file. We'll add, work paper XXX or whatever work paper it is. But for now, for AR confirmations, that's really all we need to do. We're done. Now let's go back to our actual AR testing. Always make sure that your purpose, procedures, and conclusion, an auditor can read them and go through your procedures and re-perform your procedures. That's such a big critical step in audit. You have to make sure that whatever you document, an auditor that has a sufficient amount of experience can read your procedures and literally re-perform what you did. Remember, re-perform is the key. Re-perform. So now that we have confirmations done, step number 4, BC trace confirmations returned to the schedule below and investigated any variances. We did trace the confirmations returned from the schedule below, as you can see here, tab 3.1. Tab 3.1, and here we reference back to tab 3. Cross-referencing, always cross-reference. So now that we have step 5, for confirmations not returned, BC performed alternative procedures by obtaining the client's invoices, customers' purchase orders, proof of service performed, and all right, let's see here. Let's see. We can always make sure the documentation and our grammar is correct. And proof of service performed, shipping/service documents, such as shipping documents, BOLs, to determine the existence of AR as of year end. Last step, BC also obtained the payment for the invoice selected and investigated any differences noted. So now let's go through the testing. So in here, I documented kind of what we're testing. So in here, 1.4 million is the total amount of AR that we noted on from our first video on tab 1. This is the AR aging balance. That's our total population that we're going to be sampling from. So we put that in a sample design form, and that is going to be sample design form, tab. We obviously don't have a sample design form worksheet in the file yet, but for now you can just, we're gonna reference to the sample design form that we're gonna be using. So from our sample design form, we have actually 4 samples that we're gonna be making from our population. So when we put this population into a sample design form, it spits out that 4 samples are required to be performed for testing. So that's why we selected 4 selections. When we finally send our selections to the client, we sent selections to the client. We told them, hey, for each one of these selections that we made, we're gonna need a copy of the invoice, a copy of the purchase order, a copy of the bill of lading, shipping/service documentation, and also a copy of the payment made after year end if they've received it. Again, how you send that email, I linked a video before, or sometimes, again, you can probably upload it to your firm site where you kind of exchange documents with your client. But just make sure that obviously when you test AR, you're testing for existence. You want to make sure that this AR actually exists as of year end. So now that we go through the testing and now we received all the documents that we requested from the client, again, invoice, purchase order, shipping document, and payment. That's what we requested for each one of our selections that we made from the AR aging. We sent these to the client, and the client provided all the documentation to support that this AR does in fact actually exist and is accurate as of year end. So now that we perform our testing, for this first one, we were very fortunate and we received a confirmation. So now that we receive a confirmation, we put this in our testing template. We put it in our testing template to say, okay, the amount we confirmed is $260,272. We check that to the balance here. So the confirmed balance, we type that in from our AR confirmation there, and we compare that to the amount we're testing, which is, this is our testing right here. We extracted this directly from the AR aging. Now on the right-hand side, this is where we're performing our testing. That's why I put it in blue to distinguish between, okay, this is what we extracted from the AR aging. Our recorded amount is 604,000. That's our sample. The sample we made is 604,000. And now we're going to perform the testing. So for the first one, we actually got a confirmation. Confirmation reference is tab 3.1. It's right here. So when someone's reviewing your work, they'll be able to see, okay, they got a confirmation from tab 3.1. Let me go check out that confirmation, make sure it's accurate, make sure there's no exceptions. Perfect. So then the rest of the testing for this selection is completed. There's really nothing else to be done over the selection because the customer confirmed that this balance is in fact outstanding as of year end. So for selection number 2 is from Amazon, customer number 2000, invoice 1150, invoice date 10/6/2022, and a total invoice amount of $194,722. So from that, we obtained the PO number from the purchase order. We also obtained the actual invoice, and as you can see from our testing here, this is all coming from the invoice. Obviously, PO number, you can kind of add another section for PO, but for this example's sake, we're just gonna say, hey, we did vouch the PO, we cited the PO number, and this is what we put for the PO number. Now this is invoice number. So then even in our testing here, you can probably just say invoice number 1150, the date is 10/6/2022, and an amount of $194,722. And we always compare the total amount that per the invoice that we vouched, the actual invoice supporting documentation, we're gonna agree that back to the item we selected because that's what we're sampling from. We're testing for existence here. So we made sure, okay, your client actually did in fact invoice this customer for $194,722. Now we obtained the bill of lading to make sure that your client actually shipped them this product. So in our example, we sell t-shirts. So we're actually going to ship them the t-shirts. And we want to make sure that there is in fact supporting documentation to support the fact that you can record AR. So from now we say, okay, well, we obtain the bill of lading or the shipping documentation to support the fact that they recorded accounts receivable for this sale. So we obtained bill lading number 2150, FOB shipping point. We noted that the shipping term, this is really critical because sometimes you can have clients or your clients can have shipping terms of FOB shipping point, FOB destination, depending on if it's shipping point or destination or what the shipping terms are is going to be contingent upon whether they can recognize revenue. There's also cutoff issues you have to take in mind. So always make sure that you understand what the transfer of ownership is. So for FOB shipping point, that means that, hey, once this inventory leaves my dock, that means that I have fulfilled everything I need to do and it is now your responsibility. You bear the responsibility. Once this item leaves my shipping dock, this product is now yours and I'm going to record revenue for it and I'm going to record a corresponding receivable for that as well. So the ship date or pickup date, so CPA swag from auditing them, we know that sometimes customers actually pick up their product from our warehouse, which is not unreasonable. But for this example's sake, all the products we sold, we actually shipped out. This step is super critical in calculating the lag time in when it takes your client to ship the product and when they actually invoice their customer. This is really important because think about it. Let's say, for example, we're testing an invoice on 12/31. And let's say they actually ship the invoice on 12/31, but they don't record the revenue until January 1st. Well, then you have a cutoff issue because according to this that we're auditing, they can ship product. They have shipping terms, FOB shipping point, which means once the product that we're selling, that we agreed to sell to our customer, once that leaves my shipping docks, I technically can record revenue for it because the transfer of ownership is transferred now. According to the agreement I have with my customer, once the product leaves my dock, I can record revenue for that. So there can be times when you have cutoff issues. So a lag time of 2 days isn't something that I'm overly concerned about because we're going to be performing cutoff testing in a separate video, and I'll go over that later. But for now, AR is properly recorded as of year end because, as we'll see later, it wasn't paid till after year end, but we shipped it on 10/4 and our client didn't record revenue until 10/6. There's a 2-day lag time. Once you start seeing a lag time that's like 5, 10, 15, 20 days, then there's something that you need from an audit standpoint. It's maybe something to bring up to the client and ask them, hey, why is it taking you from the day you ship it and you're able to recognize revenue? You don't recognize revenue until 2 days later or 5 days later or 1 day. I mean, ideally, when they ship it is when they should be recording revenue for this. So The fact that it's only 2 days, not overly concerning, but definitely something that we need to understand and even ask them, hey, why for this invoice did it take 2 days from the day you shipped it to the day you invoiced it? So could be something that you probably need to add some documentation for. And then lastly, we're gonna cite the check again in our testing template, the third part of our testing. We vouch a check number. And the check date, they actually got paid on 1/15/2023. The check date was received on 1/15/2023. A total check amount of $194,722. That was the actual amount applied to the invoice. There was no discount. So the variance, we always have to check, okay, did the payment also agree to the invoice amount? Because do we have any reserve amounts we need to be worrying about? Is there an allowance that the client should be recording? If they give us a material amount of discounts as of year end, then do we have an allowance that we need to worry about here? Always be kind of thinking about this. When things don't reconcile directly back to what they're recording, automatically your auditor hat should be telling you, hey, is there something going on here that I should probably be concerned about? So, but for this selection, perfect. The amount that they received in cash after year end agreed directly back to the invoice as of year end. And for this selection, we're completely done. So now let's go through selection number 3. So now we sold to Todd T-shirts, invoice 1125, invoice dated 8/28, 91,000. So same procedure here we're gonna do. We got the PO number, we got the purchase order, we obtained the invoice for it, we got the invoice date and the amount. So all of these tie directly back to what we're sampling from here, the AR aging. So all of these agree back, no problem. So for this one, we're actually gonna same thing. We wanna make sure that they actually did ship these t-shirts, or did the customer pick them up? There was a transfer of ownership of the inventory. So BOL 1625, FOB shipping point. And look at, for this one, there's no lag time. Perfect. That means that our client, the day they shipped it and the day they're able to recognize revenue and AR, they actually invoiced the customer. So there's no lag time. That's ideally what you want to see in every single one of your AR testing samples. And then lastly, the check number 828, or well, there is no check number. That was oops on my end. So there is actually no check number. On this one, no payment was received to date. See tick mark A. There's going to be times when you test AR and maybe your client hasn't received the payment from their customer. It could happen, especially if maybe they sold to a customer that is delinquent. Maybe there's an allowance that needs to be taken into account. Maybe there's something you need to think about here. So let's go read tick mark A. We added a tick mark to this selection because if there's no payment, I guarantee you someone's going to ask you, is there a collectability issue we have here? So we added a tick mark. Per discussion with John Riz, corporate controller, this invoice has not been paid yet. Therefore, there is no subsequent payment receipt as of our audit fieldwork. BC noted that as of the date of fieldwork, this invoice is aged greater than 200 days. Now think about that. This invoice is aged greater than 200 days. BC will test the collectability of this invoice at the AR allowance testing performed on tab 4. We have that reference here, which we're going to be doing in a separate video, and we'll kind of see how we evaluate this invoice. And when you're doing your testing, you need to take into account, okay, if you haven't got paid by your customer yet, and you ship them this product on August 28th, and I'm auditing this in February or March, and you still haven't got paid, as of the date I'm auditing this AR, although yes, I'm auditing the 12/31 balance, it's already aged 200 days. Like, what's wrong here? Are you going to get paid? Is this customer having financial difficulty? I mean, what should you be reserving for this invoice as of 12/31/2022? That's something that this definitely needs to be forwarded to your allowance for doubtful account testing, because you need to take this invoice into account and say, hey, client, what's going on here? Are you going to get paid, or should we be having a reserve for this? So the tick mark is perfect because you're tick marking that, hey, this customer hasn't paid yet, but although it hasn't paid, we're not saying it's an error for AR testing purposes, but we are going to take it into account in our AR allowance testing, because from an existence standpoint and what you're trying to achieve in this testing sheet, you achieved it. They actually did invoice the customer and they did ship them the product. If they didn't pay them yet, that's a valuation issue. Remember, the assertions you test are really critical also, because in AR testing, what we're trying to do here is test for existence and accuracy. And from a valuation perspective, we're going to test that at the allowance for doubtful accounts. That's what the allowance does. It's performing the valuation for the AR. But for AR substantive testing, what we're doing here for detail testing, we're testing the existence and accuracy of the AR as of year end, and we'll test the valuation of the AR through our AR allowance testing. So always make sure to distinguish those two. Depending on what assertion you're testing and what work paper and what workbook, that's what you're going to be able to do. And then again, this isn't wrong for the purpose of our AR testing, but for the purpose of AR allowance testing, completely different story. We might need a reserve for this invoice as of year end, but we'll kind of get there. Now the last selection. So our client sold to Walmart, and we see here PO number, we jot down the PO number, invoice number 1189, 1226, 58,485. And we agree all those items directly back to what we selected from. There's no difference. Perfect. Then we just make sure, again, that the bill of lading or the product was transferred. Since, again, this is a company that sells inventory, we want to make sure that either the customer picked it up or we shipped them the product. We cited the shipping terms, FOB shipping point. We noted that the ship date is 12/25/2022, and the lag time is 1 day. So from the day they shipped it, it took them 1 day later to invoice it. Again, sometimes you may even see that they invoice before they ship. You typically don't want to see anything like that because that literally means that they're recording revenue before they're actually legally able to. So always want to make sure that you have this lag time calculation in your testing, because you want to make sure that, hey, how long does it take you from the day you ship, the day you're able to recognize revenue, obviously depending on shipping terms, to the time you recognize revenue. And depending on shipping terms, this can be, you can use this as an additional test. If it was FOB destination, then maybe you'd even have to get the date that the customer actually received the product, because that's the day that they can recognize revenue. For our example, it's FOB shipping point. So our lag time, there's more of a risk that how long does it take you from the day you ship to the day you invoice? So it only took them a day, so no big deal. But again, you might need to add a tick mark for both of these just to understand, depending on who's reviewing the work, we want to understand, hey, why is there a lag time between the day you're shipping and the day you're invoicing? It could be that, hey, one day maybe the shipping department shipped the invoice at 4:55 p.m. and maybe the AR department didn't get all the required paperwork until the next day. You know, maybe something like that is reasonable, especially because there's no cutoff issues here. But again, this is going to need some further documentation to kind of finalize and wrap up our documentation in our testing. And lastly, we cited the check. So the check was 7750, check deposit date, check date was on 1/4/2023. Total check amount was 57,315. And when we look at the invoice amount is 58,485. But the total check that was applied to this invoice was 57,315. That's kind of a problem here. There's definitely a valuation issue we have here, because they recorded at year end, they recorded 58,485, but they only collected cash of 57,000. What happened here? This one, you're going to need to inquire with your client and ask them. So we tick marked it. So tick mark B, as you can see here, and let's go read tick mark B. Per discussion with John Riz, BC noted that the customer paid within 10 days. As the customer paid the invoice within 10 days, the customer was granted a 2% discount on the sale. BC analyzed invoice number 1189, noting payment terms 210, net 30. BC recalculated the discount in table B1 below and agreed it to the amount noted in the testing above without exception. Per discussion with John Riz, corporate controller, BC noted that the total discounts granted in January 2023 that related to 2022 invoices amounted to $4,500. As the payment received and the discount granted to the customer agree to the invoice selected, BC will pass on further consideration. Additionally, as the total discounts granted in 2023 that related to invoices outstanding as of 12/31/2022 was below our clearly trivial threshold, BC will pass on further consideration. So what we're saying in this tick mark and what we're letting the reviewer know is we're saying the amount we collected in cash is slightly lower than the amount our client invoice, but it's because per the invoice and per the agreement the client has with the customer is able to take a 2% discount if they pay within 10 days, and they actually did. The invoice is on 12/25 and they paid on 1/4, so they're right at that 10-day mark. And because of that, we recalculated the 2% discount just to make sure that they're properly recording the discount for the sale. So the invoice is 58,000 and 2% of that discount is 1170. We go here and we agreed that to the amount on top. Again, and also we added further documentation. If you know here, we noted that the total discounts they granted in January 2023 that related it to invoices outstanding at 12/31/2022 was only 4,500. So from a allowance, from a valuation perspective, there's really nothing else to do here. Don't get me wrong. If they granted millions in discounts, and that means our AR as of year end, the valuation of it is not technically correct, then there's something else we need to do from an audit perspective. But since they only granted 4,500 of discounts after year end that related to invoices that were outstanding as of our audit period, no big deal. There's no need to adjust anything. That's especially if we go back to tab 1, which we have our materiality here. Our 5% of materiality is 42,500. So given that the total amount's only 4,500, it's significantly below our trivial threshold. We're gonna pass on further consideration. No need to do anything else here. So if we go back, every time you go through your testing, you wanna make sure that obviously you add your tick mark, but lastly, you wanna make sure on your recorded amount and your audited amount. So your recorded amount is going to be 604,736. That's the total amount of the sample you made. Obviously, our population of AR is 1.4 million. That's our total AR outstanding. And of that AR, we made a sample of 4 selections. And of those 4 selections, the total recorded amount of our sample that our client recorded on their books for this AR that we're testing is 604,736. That is our recorded amount. Our audited amount is going to be 604,736. And that's because the total invoices, including the AR confirmation that we sent, is 604,736. Obviously, we tested everything else to make sure that the existence of the AR is correct. So then we reference here the recorded amount. Again, always make sure you link everything. So the recorded amount is 604,736. The audited amount is taken from our total here, which we also tested. And we noted that there was no errors in testing. We would then forward these amounts to the sample design form and essentially complete our testing. So that is everything that needs to be done in order to test the existence and accuracy of AR. And again, in the second video, we're going to get into actually how to test the valuation of AR, which is going to be through AR allowance testing and subsequent credit memo testing. Please make sure to leave a comment on any other topic you would like me to cover, or if there's any topic covered in this video that you would like me to go more in depth on. If you found value in this video, please make sure to smash the like button below. Until next time, work hard, dress well. Peace.